Breaking. It happened just as the champagne glasses clinked. Russian generals gathered inside a so-called secured zone near Belgorod, celebrating what they believed was a decisive strike that halted Ukraine's advance. Laughter echoed in the power plant's control hall. Toasts were made to a new dawn for Russia's energy supremacy. But they had no idea that Ukrainian reconnaissance drones had been circling silently above for hours, waiting for that precise moment, the celebration itself, to mark the final target. And then, in a blinding flash, everything changed. Eyewitnesses describe a roar that split the night sky. A single payload, 270 kilograms of high-precision explosive, plunged straight through the reinforced ceiling of the power complex. The blast was so powerful it tore through every level, igniting fuel reserves and collapsing the command floor. Flames erupted hundreds of meters high. Within seconds, the lights across the nearby district flickered out. The city of Belgorod went dark, and panic spread like wildfire. Justin, this wasn't a random strike. This was a coordinated act of precision warfare. Ukrainian intelligence had reportedly been tracking these generals for weeks. Sources claim encrypted messages were intercepted, revealing that senior Russian officers planned to use the power facility as both a logistics command post and a safe meeting hub. The irony? It became their tomb. Satellite images released minutes after the strike show a massive crater where the plant once stood. You can almost feel the devastation from above. Debris scattered across a 10-mile radius, twisted metal glinting under emergency lights, fire crews overwhelmed. Russian state TV went silent for hours, then released a short, shaky statement calling it a minor incident. But social media told a different story. Videos filmed by residents show shockwaves tearing through nearby buildings, cars flipped on their sides, windows shattered for blocks. The sky over Belgorod glowed orange until dawn. Analysts are calling this one of the most precise Ukrainian operations since the start of the war. Using real-time satellite feeds and Western targeting support, Kyiv's forces didn't just hit a facility, they struck at the heart of Russia's command coordination network. The loss of power immediately crippled nearby radar stations, and communication lines between Belgorod and Kursk went dead for nearly 8 hours. In military terms, that's an eternity. And what makes this even more shocking, the celebration had been broadcast privately through secure Russian channels, a morale-boosting event meant for top brass across multiple regions. The moment the livestream began, Ukrainian signal teams reportedly locked on to its source. They waited for the clinking of glasses, said one Ukrainian officer. And then they dropped the hammer. Imagine the chaos inside that control room. 1 second, laughter. The next, fire, smoke, screams, alarms blaring. The plant's entire core went critical. Emergency systems failed as power surged through the collapsing network. Footage shows a glowing inferno rising higher than any previous strike in the area. Residents describe hearing a sound like the sky was breaking apart. Moscow immediately scrambled to contain the fallout, both literal and political. Helicopters hovered over the burning ruins, and within hours, Russian security services sealed off the entire region, calling it a terrorist attack. But even Russian soldiers nearby could tell something was different this time. It wasn't like the others, one conscript whispered in a leaked audio clip. It was precise. They knew exactly when and where to hit. Across Ukraine, news of the strike spread like wildfire. On Telegram channels, emojis of explosions filled the comment sections. For many Ukrainians, it was a symbolic victory, proof that Russia's untouchable power grid and its overconfident generals could be reached anywhere, anytime. Meanwhile, Russian propagandists struggled to spin the narrative. Some blamed Western weapons, others insisted it was an internal malfunction. But when independent satellite data confirmed 2 Ukrainian jets flying low from the Kharkiv region just before midnight, even Kremlin loyalists fell silent. And here's the haunting part: this was not an impulsive strike. Ukraine had waited, patiently, for weeks. They let the Russians gather, plan, and celebrate, knowing that the moment of confidence would be the moment of collapse. It wasn't just a military strike, it was psychological warfare at its most devastating. Now, questions are erupting across Russia's social platforms. How did Ukraine know about this secret meeting? Who leaked the coordinates? And how deep inside Russia's command structure has Ukrainian intelligence really penetrated? As dawn broke, the scale of the destruction became clear. Entire power grids down, emergency sirens still echoing, black smoke rising into the horizon, local authorities are silent. The Kremlin is rattled. And the world is watching. This was not just another attack. This was a message delivered with precision, patience, and perfect timing. But the question remains, how could Russia's generals, men supposedly trained for war, walk straight into such a trap? What exactly made them believe they were safe? And who inside Moscow is going to take the blame for this catastrophe? It didn't happen overnight. What looked like a sudden strike, one powerful 270-kilogram bomb collapsing a Russian power plant, was in fact the result of one of Ukraine's most calculated, silent operations of the entire war. Sources now reveal that Ukrainian intelligence had been watching that facility for nearly a month. They weren't interested in the building itself. They were interested in the people inside the high-ranking Russian generals who turned it into a luxury fortress of false security. According to insiders, this plant wasn't just generating electricity, it was generating command orders. Deep within its reinforced control floor, Russian officers had converted part of the grid management center into a regional military hub. Dozens of encrypted communications passed through that system every hour, connecting Belgorod to the southern front lines in Kursk, Bryansk, and even Crimea. To Ukraine's eyes, this wasn't a civilian structure. It was a power node of occupation. Weeks before the explosion, Ukrainian drones disguised as commercial weather UAVs began circling the area. They mapped the movement of supply trucks, delivery vans, and security convoys. The patterns didn't lie. Every few nights, the same vehicles arrived at the same gate, and the same men exited the same armored sedans. These weren't engineers. They were the faces of Russia's regional war machine, and Ukraine knew it. Behind the scenes, Kyiv's special operations teams were already setting the stage. Reports suggest coordination between the Ukrainian GUR, military intelligence, and Air Force units equipped with newly modified glide bombs, each carrying more than a quarter-ton of precision explosives, guided by Western satellite data. The mission codename, Sparkfall. The objective, not just to destroy infrastructure, but to break the morale of the Russian command in the Belgorod sector. Then came the perfect opportunity. On Russian military chat groups, snippets of leaked invitations started to surface a closed recognition meeting for officers who had, allegedly, secured key defense lines near Kharkiv. The event would be held inside the Belgorod power plant, a celebration for success that never truly existed. Whether those invitations were genuinely Russian or part of Ukraine's deception remains unclear. But one thing is certain: Ukraine was listening. Intercepted communications, later confirmed by independent sources, revealed careless chatter among Russian officers. They mentioned wine, security clearances, guest lists. One even joked, "The Ukrainians won't dare to touch us here." That single sentence sealed their fate. From there, everything moved like clockwork. Ukrainian reconnaissance confirmed the arrival of high-value targets. Drones equipped with infrared scanners captured heat signatures clustering in one section of the building right where the control floor used to be. On command, the strike teams moved into position. A pair of Ukrainian Su-27 seconds, carrying customized 270 kilograms, glide bombs launched from airfields near Kharkiv, each guided by satellite correction and real-time visual data from drones overhead. The moment of the strike was planned to coincide with the height of the celebration. As the Russian officers gathered around a table to toast their so-called victory, the precision bomb was released. Traveling at near supersonic speed, it sliced through the clouds and tore straight through the plant's roof. The timing was surgical. Within 3 seconds of detonation, all power across Belgorod flickered out. Analysts say it's one of the most sophisticated examples of psychological warfare Ukraine has ever executed. They didn't just destroy a target, one Western defense expert explained. They destroyed the illusion of safety. They made Russian generals feel hunted even in their own territory. And the fallout was immediate. Panic spread among Russian command networks. Dozens of encrypted lines went silent as officers tried to verify who had survived. In some regions, lower-ranking commanders issued emergency stand-down orders, believing another wave of strikes was imminent. For nearly half a day, Russia's Belgorod command structure vanished into confusion. Meanwhile, inside Moscow, shockwaves reached the top. Intelligence agencies scrambled to identify the leak. Fingers pointed in every direction, from disgruntled soldiers to rival officers. Some sources whisper that an insider tipped Ukraine off, leaking meeting schedules and coordinates. Others suspect that Western surveillance satellites intercepted Russian military frequencies. Whatever the source, the Kremlin's silence is deafening. And this is where the true magnitude of the strike becomes clear. The destruction of the Belgorod power hub wasn't just about energy loss, it crippled multiple layers of Russia's logistics. Fuel shipments to frontline divisions halted. Drone production sites in nearby factories went offline. Even border surveillance cameras went dark for hours, leaving key checkpoints blind. Local reports describe massive evacuations of Russian personnel from other safe command centers. They're afraid to even turn on their radios, one Ukrainian soldier said. Every transmission feels like a target signal now. In the hours after the explosion, Russian state media broadcasted shaky footage of recovery operations, blurred images of fire trucks and cranes. But eagle-eyed viewers quickly noticed something off. In the background, behind the smoke, pieces of aircraft wreckage and shattered armored vehicles were visible. The plant wasn't just destroyed, it was vaporized. And here's the cruel twist. While Russia tried to bury the truth, Ukraine capitalized. Within minutes, Ukrainian officials posted cryptic messages on social media. One simply read, "Timing is everything." Another shared a photo of a clock striking midnight, captioned, "When they drink, we strike." It went viral. Across the front lines, morale surged. Soldiers on Ukrainian Telegram channels celebrated with memes showing toasting generals replaced by cartoon explosions. For them, it wasn't just revenge, it was poetic justice. But deep inside the Kremlin, this event opened a new nightmare. If Ukrainian bombs can now reach this deep, if their intelligence can pinpoint gatherings of top officers, then nowhere in Russia is truly safe. And that's what terrifies Moscow the most. Not the explosion, not the damage, but the precision, the knowledge that Ukraine waited, calculated, and hit with terrifying accuracy. Still, as smoke continues to rise over Belgorod, new reports suggest this might not be an isolated strike. Ukrainian intelligence may already be tracking other gatherings of Russian officers. The pattern is clear, and the message unmistakable. Nowhere is beyond reach. But the next chapter is even more shocking. Because what happened after the strike, the chain reaction across Russia's power grid, the panic in the Kremlin, the international whispers from NATO, revealed something far deeper than anyone expected. And that's where our story turns next. Because this wasn't just a single explosion. It was the spark of a much larger crisis that may reshape the entire war. The morning after the blast, Moscow woke up to chaos. Not the kind you can hide behind censorship or state TV filters, but a raw, uncontrollable wave of panic that rippled through every layer of power. Inside the Kremlin's Situation Room, the first reports were staggering. A regional blackout stretching across Belgorod, partial disruptions in Kursk and Bryansk, dozens of communication towers offline, and most devastating of all, confirmed casualties among senior Russian officers. It wasn't just a loss of infrastructure, it was a decapitation. The power plant that was supposed to symbolize stability had become a crater, and with it, Russia's confidence was gone. Generals who once strutted through briefings with smug certainty now whispered, afraid their every move was being watched. "It's like someone is inside our walls," muttered one anonymous colonel to a Moscow journalist. That quote never aired on Russian television, but it spread online, translated and shared across Europe. Breaking in the hours following the explosion, Russia's entire southern command chain began fracturing. Field officers stopped receiving direct orders. Reports emerged of unauthorized withdrawals in several frontline sectors. Russian soldiers along the Belgorod-Kharkiv border filmed themselves sitting idle, complaining that they hadn't received supplies or commands in over 12 hours. "No fuel, no signal, no command," one soldier said in a shaky voice recording. "We're blind out here." And for the Kremlin, the nightmare only deepened. Satellite surveillance from Western intelligence confirmed cascading failures across the regional grid. Without Belgorod's main power hub, at least 6 nearby substations went offline. Armored convoys ran out of fuel mid-route. Drone hangars went dark. Entire anti-air batteries lost radar visibility for hours. It was a domino effect, one precision strike that unraveled a third of Russia's logistics network in the West. But it wasn't just military paralysis. Panic spilled into civilian life. Belgorod's skyline burned for hours, and as night fell again, the region plunged into absolute darkness. Thousands of residents flooded supermarkets, fearing shortages. Videos surfaced, showing cars lining up for miles at gas stations, only to find pumps empty. On Telegram, local administrators begged people to stay calm, but their messages were drowned out by screams, sirens, and the constant hum of evacuation helicopters overhead. Meanwhile, in Moscow, the blame game began. The Ministry of Defense pointed fingers at the FSB. The FSB accused local governors of negligence. And Putin, furious, pale, and visibly shaken in leaked footage, reportedly demanded names, arrests, and results within 24 hours. What he got instead were resignations and excuses. One senior logistics officer was found dead the next morning, officially from heart failure. Insiders called it suicide, others called it a purge. And as Russia descended into internal panic, the world reacted. In Washington, Pentagon officials described the strike as a surgical success. In Brussels, NATO representatives held an emergency session not to condemn Ukraine, but to assess the potential fallout. If Ukraine can reach that deep, Russia's strategic rear is no longer a safe zone, said one European intelligence chief. Even the UK's Ministry of Defence released a cryptic statement. Precision is redefining this conflict. But behind those diplomatic phrases was quiet satisfaction. Western analysts had long predicted that Russia's greatest weakness wasn't its weapons, it was its arrogance. And this strike exposed that arrogance for all to see. A nation that boasted of invulnerability, undone by its own overconfidence. A group of generals celebrating a false victory, annihilated in one carefully timed blast. Still, the ripples didn't stop at humiliation. Inside Russia's economic circles, the shock turned into fear. Investors fled energy markets, fearing that Ukraine might target more of Russia's critical grid infrastructure. The ruble dropped overnight. Supply chains froze. Even the Kremlin's propaganda networks stumbled, struggling to craft a narrative, convincing enough to calm their citizens. The official statement, claiming the incident was caused by electrical malfunction, was ridiculed online. Within hours, thousands of Russian users flooded comment sections with one word: strike. And as silence fell over Belgorod, Ukraine's message was clear. We can reach you anywhere. This wasn't just about bombs. It was about control, psychological dominance. For the first time in months, the fear wasn't on the Ukrainian side. It had crossed the border. Internationally, the symbolism was impossible to ignore. In Berlin, newspapers hailed it as Ukraine's turning point. In Warsaw, headlines screamed, Russia's safe zone collapses. Even in Washington, the footage of the burning power plant dominated screens, accompanied by one recurring phrase: patience wins wars. At the same time, Russia's military bloggers, once loyal voices of patriotism, began to fracture too. Some accused their own generals of criminal incompetence. Others whispered that foreign agents had infiltrated their networks. A few dared to suggest something even darker, that Putin himself was being fed false intelligence by corrupt commanders. And that's when the panic began turning inward. Reports from Moscow describe a quiet lockdown among the elite. Meetings cancelled, flights delayed, private jets grounded. Oligarchs who once praised Putin's resilience began shifting assets abroad again. The sense of control that once defined the Russian capital was slipping away, replaced by unease. We're no longer untouchable, one aide reportedly admitted. And that's what terrifies them. Meanwhile, in Ukraine, the mood was electric. Soldiers on the front lines passed around the footage with pride. For Kherson, one caption read, "For Mariupol," said another, the psychological victory was immense. They hadn't just destroyed a building, they'd shattered the illusion that Russia's power could protect its own. And then came NATO's subtle but unmistakable signal. A coordinated series of reconnaissance flights appeared on radar, American, British, Polish. They weren't attacking, they were watching. Watching how Russia responded, measuring its panic, recording every move. To the West, this wasn't just a Ukrainian success. It was a strategic data point proof that precision, patience, and planning could achieve what brute force never could. By the third day, Belgorod's fires were still smoldering. The air reeked of metal and smoke. The crater was visible from orbit. And somewhere in Kyiv, intelligence officers were already reviewing the footage, analyzing patterns, preparing for the next move. When arrogance meets precision, one Ukrainian commander said, the result is inevitable. But here's the twist. The strike wasn't the end of the operation. It was the beginning of something bigger. Because as Russia scrambled to recover, Ukraine was already exploiting the chaos, targeting supply routes, intercepting communications, cutting deeper into Moscow's command grid. And the world began asking the question that Moscow feared most. If this is what one strike can do, what happens when Ukraine unleashes 10? Stay tuned, because what came next didn't just shake Russia's military. It rattled the very foundation of Putin's rule itself. By the end of the week, the fires in Belgorod had turned to smoke, but the political blaze in Moscow was only just beginning. Inside the Kremlin's walls, there was silence, the kind of silence that doesn't calm, but terrifies. Putin's generals avoided eye contact, officials spoke in whispers, and the once untouchable Ministry of Defense was under siege from within. Every department was hunting for a traitor. Every man feared his phone might already be tapped. The destruction of the Belgorod power plant wasn't just a battlefield loss, it was a psychological earthquake that reached the Kremlin's very core. Putin's entire doctrine of control through fear had turned inward. The fear that once bound his circle together was now consuming it. In a closed meeting, sources say Putin slammed a folder onto the table, shouting, "We are bleeding from the inside." His security chief reportedly responded, "Then someone close to you is holding the knife." The room fell into dead silence. Days later, that security chief disappeared from public view. This wasn't paranoia, it was collapse. And Ukraine had orchestrated it perfectly. The strike that annihilated the Belgorod command hub had also exposed how deep Ukrainian intelligence had penetrated Russian structures. Leaks from Moscow's own FSB analysts confirmed what the Kremlin refused to admit. The meeting's exact coordinates, timing, and guest list had been transmitted out of Russia through encrypted civilian networks, meaning someone on the inside had betrayed them. That realization sent shockwaves through every branch of the Russian government. Loyalty tests began overnight. Dozens of officers were detained without explanation. Some never reappeared. Meanwhile, the families of the dead generals were told to remain silent, their funerals held in secret, names omitted from state television broadcasts. And as Moscow turned on itself, Ukraine pressed the advantage. Drone footage released days later showed more strikes on power substations and rail junctions feeding into Belgorod. It wasn't random. Each target was another artery, another choke point. Ukraine wasn't just bombing, it was surgically dismantling Russia's ability to recover. But the real power shift came from the outside. NATO's intelligence networks, emboldened by Ukraine's precision, quietly expanded their cooperation. U.S. reconnaissance planes were seen circling closer to Russian airspace than ever before. British electronic warfare ships stationed in the Black Sea began tracking Russian troop communications in real time. Western capitals didn't just cheer Ukraine's success, they built upon it. In Washington, one senior defense official summarized it bluntly: "The myth of Russian security is over." From London to Berlin, the message echoed. No one in the West was hiding their approval. What Ukraine had done was more than military, it was symbolic. A small, outnumbered nation had exposed a superpower's weakness. The footage of a flaming power plant, the shattered windows, the terrified officials fumbling through darkness, it became the defining image of the war's new phase. Meanwhile, inside Russia, panic spread among the elite. Oligarchs began fleeing again. Private jets filled the runways at Moscow's Vnukovo airport, heading for Dubai, Istanbul, even China. But even Beijing began keeping its distance. Chinese state media, normally cautious, reported the Belgorod disaster with an unusual tone. Russia faces new internal instability. That phrase, internal instability, was a dagger. And it didn't stop there. Economic tremors followed fast. The ruble sank to its lowest level in months. Blackouts hit multiple border towns as replacement transformers failed to arrive. Ordinary Russians stood in endless queues for fuel, bread, and basic goods. On social media, frustration turned into fury. "They're celebrating in Kyiv," one Russian user wrote, "while we sit in the dark." The Kremlin tried to clamp down. They banned certain words online. Belgorod, strike, celebration. But it was too late. The internet had already seen everything. Satellite images, intercepted audio, leaked messages. The truth spread faster than censorship could contain. And then came the breaking point. Leaked documents from within Russia's defense ministry revealed that several top generals had deliberately falsified security reports, assuring the Kremlin that Belgorod was shielded from all aerial threats. Those signatures, still visible at the bottom of the forms, became death warrants. Within hours, military police began rounding up the authors. Rumors swirled that at least 2 were executed in secret. Putin's system was devouring itself. The generals blamed the intelligence agencies. The intelligence agencies blamed the governors. And the governors blamed Moscow. No one wanted to be next. The machinery of control that had kept Russia's elite aligned was rusting in real time. And through it all, Ukraine kept its silence. No gloating, no public declaration of victory, only quiet confidence. Their social media simply posted one image: a broken Russian flag, its colors fading into smoke. The caption read, "This is what happens when you celebrate too soon." Across NATO, the mood was shifting. What began as cautious support was now turning into strategic confidence. "Ukraine has shown what precision and patience can do," said the French defense minister. "They don't need to outgun Russia, they just need to outthink it." Hen, 62. Inside Kyiv's intelligence headquarters, the walls were covered in maps, red lines showing Russian supply chains, blue markers showing every successful hit. One senior officer reportedly said, "They still think we're chasing them. They don't realize we're already inside." And that statement, chilling as it sounds, is beginning to look true. Because intelligence intercepts suggest Ukraine now possesses deep access to Russian military scheduling, regional movement logs, and possibly even Kremlin communications. Every strike feels more precise, more personal. By the 10th day after the Belgorod explosion, Western analysts were using a new term: strategic implosion. It meant that Russia was collapsing not from foreign invasion, but from internal distrust, fear, and the slow erosion of its command structure. The Belgorod strike didn't just destroy a power plant, it lit the fuse for a political meltdown. And as for Putin, rumors swirl that his circle is shrinking, his isolation growing. Meetings now take place in smaller rooms, surrounded by fewer loyalists. Reports say he travels with decoy convoys and doubles to mask his location. Every trip, every call, every move is shrouded in paranoia. Ukraine's strike didn't just damage Russia's infrastructure, it broke the illusion that the Kremlin was in control. For the first time since the invasion began, it's Moscow, not Kyiv, that looks cornered, unstable, and afraid. The question now haunting everyone from Washington to Warsaw: how long before this fear turns inward, before the Kremlin eats itself alive? Because, as the smoke clears and Russia scrambles to rebuild, one truth is becoming impossible to deny. The war has changed forever. Ukraine didn't just fight back, it flipped the entire board. And if this was just one strike, one moment of perfect patience and precision, what happens when the next wave comes? What happens when Ukraine decides the time has come not just to defend, but to end the war? So, what do you think really happened that night in Belgorod? Was this a single perfect strike, or the beginning of something much bigger inside Russia's walls? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I read every one of them, and your thoughts shape what we cover next. If this story made you feel like the war has just changed direction, hit that like button so more people see what's really unfolding. And if you want to be here the moment the next chapter breaks, when Ukraine moves again, when the Kremlin starts cracking wider, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Because what's coming next will shake Moscow even harder than this. Stay sharp, stay informed, and I'll see you in the next report.